Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to The Account, bringing you the news update for day 316 of the war in Ukraine. I do have one article today I want to point out, and there has been a rather huge backlash regarding a proposed truce for Christmas. Initially, I did not consider making an individual segment out of it, but more and more reactions are coming in. We go over those first before we move on to the regular news segment with the situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, and the international developments. First, though, the flashpoints along the front. Not much has been reported from the front lines today, just minor battles and artillery duels, but we will still take a look at the two main points. Crimea. Ukraine repulsed an attack around Ploschanka and reported shelling of Kusmine. Bakhmut. Russians reportedly continue to make minor gains north of Bakhmut towards Solidar. Reports from several days ago suggested Russia was deploying VDV units to this area, and Russian Telegram channels now report VDV units are operating in the Solidar direction. South of Bakhmut, Ukraine repelled attacks in Bakhmut and Kudyumivka. The head of the Donetsk Oblast military administration, Pavlo Kirilenko, reports that over 60% of Bakhmut has been destroyed in fighting so far. And now for the highlighted article by Ilya Ponomarenko, titled As Battle of Bakhmut nears culmination, Ukraine's artillery gasps for more ammo. This is a well-written and highly interesting article about the situation in Bakhmut and the hardships faced by its defenders. It is not very easy to summarize this article, so please go and check it out. And now, the latest updates on the Christmas truce proposal by Russia. Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, has called for a Christmas truce along the front from January 6th to January 7th. Kirill, who has supported Russian aggression since the beginning of the war, stated the truce is needed so that Orthodox people could visit church services on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, responded by reminding everyone that the Russian Orthodox Church has called for the genocide of Ukrainians, incited mass murder, and is pushing for even greater militarization in Russia. He said, "The Russian Orthodox Church statement about a Christmas truce is a cynical trap and an element of propaganda." Later today, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu to observe a temporary ceasefire along the entire front in Ukraine from midday on January 6th to midnight on January 7th. Ukraine has so far not agreed to observe any ceasefire, considering Russian attacks on civilian and critical infrastructure has continued unabated throughout the holiday season. Later this evening, Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the head of the President's Office of Ukraine, once again commented on the situation, suggesting Russia should leave the territories it occupied if they desire a truce. He said, "First, Ukraine doesn't attack foreign territory and doesn't kill civilians, as Russia does. Ukraine destroys only members of the occupation army on its territory. Second, Russia must leave the occupied territories. Only then will it have a temporary truce. Keep hypocrisy to yourself." More reactions to Russian President Vladimir Putin's truce come from US President Joe Biden and Denis Pushilin, the Kremlin-appointed leader of the DPR. According to President Biden, Putin is trying to find some oxygen, while Pushilin denied the truce, saying that the decision was made for Orthodox Christians, and for obvious reasons, the leadership of the rest of Ukraine is not considered that. Oleksiy Danilov, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, also commented on the truce, saying, "And to whom are they offering this truce? There is a fairly simple solution. They pack their suitcases, take all their junk, and go to Russia. We will not negotiate with them on any truce. It has nothing to do with us." In his evening speech, President Zelensky reacted to the Russian proposal by saying that the war will end when the Russian soldiers either leave or the Ukrainian army drives them out. He added, "So let them take the toilets, they will need them on the way, and return home, across our border since 1991. And now for our news segment, starting with the latest out of Ukraine. President Zelensky has called another Supreme Commander-in-Chief meeting. The topics discussed included reports on the operational situation on the front, the Russian plans in the immediate future, and the Army of Drones project. Norway is donating another 10,000 artillery shells for M109 howitzers to Ukraine. Meanwhile, President Biden said the US is considering sending Bradley fighting vehicles. Germany, meanwhile, handed over another military aid package. Some of the items included are 20 70mm rocket launchers on pickup trucks with rockets, 30 drone detection systems, 8 reconnaissance drones, 7 tracked and remote-controlled infantry vehicles for support tasks, 63 pickup trucks, 27 anti-drone jammers and sensors, 21 power generators, 32 mobile heating systems, 36,400 wool blankets. Tomorrow, on January 6th, the United States will announce a new military aid package for Ukraine worth $2.85 billion, which will be the largest package provided so far. The package of military aid will include several dozen Bradley fighting vehicles, the Washington Post reported, citing US officials who spoke on condition of anonymity. During a phone call between US President Joe Biden and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, it was decided that both countries will send armored vehicles to Ukraine. As reported before, the US will provide Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, while Germany agreed to supply Ukraine with Marder infantry fighting vehicles. Additionally, Germany has agreed to send one additional Patriot missile system to Ukraine. Moving on to the situation inside the occupied territories. Russian occupation forces have begun extending their reprisals against the local population. In particular, they are looking for artillery spotters who they blame recent strikes on. If those are detained and deported, the occupiers hope attacks will stop. During the night, powerful explosions were reported in Melitopol. Volodymyr Rohov, the Kremlin-appointed puppet leader of Zaporizhia Oblast, claimed air defense was active and more information will be released later. However, so far there have been no updates. Explosions were also heard in Crimea. Authorities reported that air defense shot down drones carrying explosives during the night and that there has been no damage. Civilian transport companies are beginning to refuse driving along the so-called land corridor to Crimea because it is in strike range of Ukraine. Especially fuel transport companies are abandoning the route due to high risks. As a result, prices in occupied Crimea are rising. And to wrap up the news segment, the latest international developments. The Institute for the Study of War writes in its latest assessment that Russian forces are increasingly relying on Shahed drones to attack Ukrainian infrastructure. Although Russia has significantly depleted its stocks of drones, they still pose a cheap alternative to precision-guided missiles, which Russia has a hard time replenishing. According to the researchers, Russia is running the risk of completely running out of Shahed drones by May 2023 if they continue to use them the same way as in 2022. Therefore, Russia most likely will seek to deepen relations with Iran to procure more weapons for the war in Ukraine. According to the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Wagner mercenaries have begun recruiting political prisoners in Chechnya. Meanwhile, Yevgeny Prigozhin has discharged the first batch of prisoners recruited for the war in Ukraine after they served their agreed time in the Wagner units. The prisoners had all convictions removed from their record, and Prigozhin said society should treat them with respect. Turkish President Erdoğan and Russian President Putin held a meeting today to discuss Turkish-Russian relations, including energy, regional issues, the Russian-Ukrainian war, and the war in Syria. During the meeting, Vladimir Putin stated that Ukraine must accept the losses of territory if they wish for dialogue. He went on to blame the West for the escalation in Ukraine by pumping it full of weapons. The Russian frigate Admiral Gorshkov, armed with Zircon hypersonic missiles, has started its journey from the Black Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. According to Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, the ship is going to perform combat duties along the shores of NATO countries. The Russian State Duma has threatened the West and in particular Germany with expropriation measures in case of any seizure of Russian assets. Germany has considered seizing Russian assets to help finance the rebuilding of Ukraine. And now for the daily intelligence update by the UK Ministry of Defence. On December 27, 2022, Oleksiy Danilov, Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, reported that Russia had relocated long-range aviation (LRA) Tu-95MS Bear heavy bombers and Tu-22M3 backfire medium bombers to Russia's Far East. On December 5th and 26th, 2022, the LRA Engels Air Base was struck and several aircraft damaged. Russia has highly likely responded to the incidents by conducting a general dispersal of LRA aircraft, especially to airfields further away from Ukraine. The LRA will still be able to fire air-launched cruise missiles into Ukraine because the weapons have a 5,000-kilometer range in addition to the flight range of the bombers. However, operating from dispersal locations will add additional maintenance stress and will further deplete the limited flying hours available on these aging aircraft. And finally, the evening report by the General Staff of Ukraine. To maintain the offensive potential and replenish losses, the enemy continues to carry out mobilization measures. The main efforts of the Russian occupiers are focused on attempts to completely capture the Donetsk region within the administrative border. They are conducting offensive operations in the Bakhmut and Liman directions. The enemy unsuccessfully tries to improve the tactical position in the Kupiansk and Avdiivka direction. In Novopavlivka, Zaporizhia and Kherson, it is being defended. The military-political leadership of the Russian Federation is taking measures to prevent the mass departure of men of conscription age abroad before the next wave of mobilization, which is expected in January of this year. A complete ban on crossing the state border for men of conscription age is not excluded. Forced passporting of the population in the temporarily occupied and occupied territories of Luhansk region continues. Thus, banking institutions in the occupied region require passports of the Russian Federation to issue payment cards. And that wraps up another one of our news reports. If you're interested in any of the articles and want to read up on it, you can find links to them in the description. Thank you once again for tuning in and have a great day. You are listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.